All right, welcome in everybody. My name is Delaney McWalters. I am a marketing consultant, and I get to work with great organizations like the Lupus Foundation of New England. And one of our community members is here today to talk about her journey with lupus and what that's looked like in the past, and maybe what it looks like today, and how that's different. Trisha Santos, thanks for joining me.
Oh, thanks, Delaney. Thanks for having me today.
Yeah, absolutely. So why don't you give a little bit of your background, maybe when you were diagnosed, what led you to reach out, to medical professionals and even seek a diagnosis. Tell me a little bit about sort of the beginning of your journey.
Sure. So I am a person who has lived with lupus for 37 years. That is a statement that is so overwhelming even today when it comes out of my mouth. 37 years, my rheumatologist reminded me, is my whole entire adult life. And it's not lost on us. So I can remember as a child, and everybody sort of has this story that, kind of the precursor or things that happen. But I had a lot of skin irritation as a child. It would come and it would go. Um, you know, um, Really nothing of note. I had pneumonia and I was in the hospital, a bad bout of it, when I was a teenager, and I was in the hospital for a week and I was out of school for 2 months. Um, and all of these things sort of led, what I believe sort of led up to, in my last year, what would be my last year of full-time college education, was that lupus diagnosis. And I was just down on the ground with that overwhelming fatigue that so many of us in the lupus community talk about. Um, a, a fatigue that you just never can catch up on the sleep. It's not like catching the red eye from California. It is a fatigue that you'll never seem to catch up on that sleep, and you really have a very difficult time, um, functioning, getting out of bed and functioning. And I had that, and I had the joint pain, and I had fevers. And at the time, I processed claims for one of the insurance companies here in Massachusetts. And I was able to see a doctor who very quickly sort of looked at the whole picture and sent me right over to a rheumatologist. And I'm so thankful for that. And I went through I sort of went through the process of seeing 3 rheumatologists really to make that definitive diagnosis, because it just didn't feel right. We didn't have it in our family history, and it just seemed at that point, with working and going to school full time, it didn't seem like I was unhealthy or I would have such a devastating diagnosis. So, we fast forward 37 years, and I will tell you, the symptom profile has changed so much, so very much from those first years. I have, major organ involvement that I would have told you 6 months ago I didn't have. So it's a box of surprises. I'm sure, as you've learned to talk to other patients, other researchers, we really don't know what's around the bend, and it never fails to surprise, Delaney.
Yeah, absolutely. That's something that, well, this theme is something that I've heard over and over again from different patients that I've talked to, is that it took oftentimes somebody else pointing them in the direction of a rheumatologist, that oftentimes people with lupus don't even know where to start, because they don't know people in their life that have lupus. Like, this is all very new to them, and so it really takes a doctor or a therapist or a friend or someone to have some sort of interaction, and like the alarm bells go off of like, hey, this sounds like something I've seen before. And so it's wild to me how often that comes up. How has your This is kind of a big question, but how has your experience of lupus changed over the last 30 plus years?
Oh, the change is incredible, because when I was diagnosed with lupus, there was one book, And it was a firsthand account of a very older woman in the local area. She was in Watertown, Massachusetts. And this was the only guide that I had. There was God, I have to say it, there was no internet. There was no, logging on, taking a look, figuring out sort of what was going on day to day. Um, and the advice I was given at that time was to remain sort of ignorant. And that would, by which I mean, the doctor said, now don't read about this because, the news isn't good. And I think to myself, and I still think to myself about that piece of advice, we want to be our best advocates, and education allows us to be our best advocates. So that was a big thing. And in the early days, we had two treatment options for prescription drugs. It was prednisone, which is a steroid, Plaquenil, which is an anti-malarial. And the other piece of advice was go home and get some rest. I'd like to think that someone newly diagnosed would get more information, be connected with a support group, whether it be online or in person, particularly age appropriate, because I did go to a support group in the beginning, and I was a very young person sitting amongst some very old people, and that just didn't make you connect. When I went to the rheumatologist, I probably should have seen a pediatric rheumatologist in those days, right? But I went to, again, adult care, and there was nobody who looked like me. And that was something I think I kind of, I had trouble kind of swimming. I was swimming against the tide, if you will. I didn't, there was nobody who looked like me, nobody who was standing in my shoes, nobody who could even sort of give advice. So I'm pleased now that when I hear about a young adult support group or any type of collegial support groups that are out there to help one another, I can see its need, but it wasn't there for me, and that I think would have, when I look back on this journey, it would have been a lot. I would also say in 37 years, you grow as a person and your life experiences become many. And I didn't know how to sit in the chair, in an exam room and really be able to better articulate my symptoms. Just to give it a blanket, I don't feel well, I'm sick. I now have learned to be a better advocate for myself. I wouldn't say the best, but it's been a journey, and I've gotten there, right? And I think that's one of the things you struggle with when you're newly diagnosed with probably anything, is how do you, in that short period of time, you have a healthcare professional's attention before they move on to the next room and the next patient, sort of get what you need. And that was something I really struggled with in the beginning, which today, I have my medication list, and I have notes and questions sometimes, and you sort of spitball after you have a good relationship with that doctor.
Yeah.
You feel very comfortable to talk. I, as a young person, did not feel very comfortable with some of the older people who were treating me.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's really hard because it's multifaceted, right? It's like,
Right.
not only are you a young person that may have a hard time speaking up about anything in general, never
Mhm.
mind yourself or your own body or your symptoms, but then also learning this new language of like fatigue versus I just want to go to sleep all the time, and like dizziness or vertigo versus like just all these other like terms. And that's where that education piece comes in too, right? Is like making yourself informed that like it's not in your head, this is like a real thing that you're experiencing. It has a name, and kind of getting everybody to a place where we're all speaking the same language, I think, is a huge step. And that self-advocacy piece is something that we've just heard again and again is life-saving in a lot of ways. It's really just the name of the game when it comes to a chronic condition like lupus. And so I think that's hard, particularly for women, for young women, but so very important, you know. tell me a little bit about how you got involved in Lupus Foundation of New England. Have you always been from this area? How did you hear about it? How did you get involved? And what does that look like now?
So I would say I was really, I wasn't really interested in ever joining a support group. And I felt that, most of the organizations, wanted to see you join that. And I had a very busy life. I had a job I've worked for the last 27 years in financial services. And an event came up, and it was in Boston, and it was partnered with a national lupus organization. And I went, and this is true, Trisha, um, because the last person's name on the on the attendee list, I actually had to call the director at the time and say to her, would you mind if I come? I missed the deadline for registering. And I was so welcomed, and I sat down and I spoke to people I'd never met before, didn't know anything about them. And I learned very quickly this common bond that's out in the community, in the patient community, and the families of patients. And I was there by myself, and what do you have to do when you go anywhere alone is you have to socialize. And the program includes lunch, and a very well-noted researcher was at the podium, and I was so welcomed. I really truly enjoyed that afternoon. And I said to the director of Lupus Foundation New England, please come to my office, please have lunch with me one day. And she came, and not only did a great friendship blossom, not only did I learn that, she sort of rose through running the organization, had done really worn all the hats in a very small organization of people, small but mighty. But one of the things that has always kept me a member of being in the local community and supporting Lupus Foundation New England was the words that I heard at that lunch meeting. And that was, Trisha, I've been at this a long time, and I'm here to see a cure for lupus. I hope before I retire, I will know a cure for lupus. And I don't think you'll ever get a bigger commitment to lupus patients, to the research community here in Boston that's so robust. But it's the commitment to our local patients, that there is somebody here, there's somebody who's going to answer the phone, there's somebody that's going to encourage them, probably cry with them on the phone, but they're going to offer education and support. And that means so much. Maybe I couldn't take advantage of it when I was newly diagnosed, but I want that to be a resource for someone else. So that's truly why I continue to support Lupus Foundation New England.
Yeah, I think that grassroots local feel is unique to this organization. And I think, you show up to events, you're gonna see the same folks over and over again. It's a community, the support groups are really strong, the people within the organization are really truly care. Everything that you just said, I think, is really applicable. And yeah, it's really just the case of the little bit that I've gotten to witness of the organization as well. So are you a board member? Forgive me, I forget. Or tell me a little bit about like your specific like role within it, or what you like to do.
So we sort of consider me a patient advocate for the state of Massachusetts. And so what that has given me, the springboard to do is I've been on panels at events. I've been able to go to Capitol Hill and advocate along with other advocates nationally to ensure that additional funds will be given and written into the budget for lupus research. And this is a huge and important thing. I am so proud to tell you, Delaney, that I live in the district for the head of the lupus caucus at the national level. And so I'm always one that will tell you that first, because I think it's so important, to raise your voice and make sure that people are looking out for patients as well as in their district. So I've had all these wonderful opportunities to do this and to represent Lupus Foundation New England. I also travel on to the American College of Rheumatology at both the gracious support of Lupus and Allied Diseases Association Inc. and Lupus Foundation New England, and that has forever changed my perspective about young researchers still very involved in rheumatology and all the wonderful things that we hope are ahead for our patient population.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. What do you wish that more people understood or recognized or even just knew about lupus?
So there was a campaign years ago, and it was called "Let's Make Lupus Visible." And I think it is what we call an invisible disability. So you're not walking around with a cast or something as visible as a broken bone. But I wish that there was some short take that we could educate folks on for lupus, because there is still a great number of people who look at you sort of quizzically and say, like, what's wrong with you? What do you have? It doesn't seem to get the airplay or the education that it needs within families, within members of your community. I can tell you, and this is a very interesting piece of my story, is that I've worked for 27 years in financial services, and I've never, for the same company, and I've held all different sorts of positions in different areas, compliance, data center operations, and I have never divulged my diagnosis. And it's really something. So this morning I got a 2 or 3 question survey about the disabilities affinity group internally, and their focus is on neurodivergent employees. Nothing more, nothing less. And I said, disabilities is not a one size fits all, like lupus isn't. But I'm saying we can't put all of our eggs in that one basket, right? And say neurodivergent is the only employee who shows up for work, because lupus is invisible and people aren't taking into account that you may need to park in the handicap parking. You will need a multitude. I have a light accommodation that is covered by the Americans with Disabilities Act. It has made that so difficult in the last 12 years to go to work and sit under the lighting that the rest of my colleagues can sit under. And it's been really difficult. And I've had very insensitive managers to that. And I think is now the time that I decide to tell them what what I suffer from. And I think now we need to make this world a little more empathetic and a little more sensitive to everyone's plight, whatever your disability is. There's room at the table for everyone. And I think, lupus really hasn't gotten the showcase that it needs. And we will all come together and say the same thing, like, why? Like, why? We thankfully, we know it's not as fatal as it was, 50 years ago, but it still is, and people are still dying from it. So it does require a lot more education. And I don't have the answer on how to do that.
Yeah, I think, part of why we're doing this, campaign for Lupus Awareness Month, part of why Lupus Awareness Month even exists in the first place, I think, is to bring this awareness to this disease that is oftentimes so complicated, nuanced, and individualistic, really. And I think that's what's so hard about it for people to understand, perhaps, is it's not a one size fits all diagnosis. It's not, which, I mean, there's many conditions out there that you could say that about, but I think the fact that it's not visible, human beings are sometimes simple creatures where we believe what we see, type of thing. And so, yeah, it's unfortunate because it affects people daily, and it affects people's ability to not only function but also their mental health. I talked a little bit about that with another patient, and just the mental burden, I guess I'll say, of having to think through every situation, every interaction, like how is this going to tie in? Am I going to have enough energy? Am I going to have a flare up? Like what can I bring my meds? Like just like
Mhm.
the constant planning, that aspect of it just feels really overwhelming to me.
It is. It is. And I, 37 years in, I have a very simple mantra. Um, there are a couple of things I say. We move forward. It might not be a great day. It might not have been a great week. Food might have not looked so good on the plate. But I've really tried to adopt that I move forward. It wasn't going to do me any good to look back on a bad day or a bad week. And I also feel, this really comes from a very important place in my heart, but I cannot spend the time convincing you how sick I am. I can't. That's a lot of time and energy. And if you don't feel, because you judge a book by its cover, and I look so healthy, because I get this all the time, you look great. And I think to myself, oh my God, I'm dragging, right? I'm dragging. I didn't even think I could make it to this event or this day or whatever. I can't spend that kind of time. It's a real drain, and it's really unnecessary. I think, the world needs to be a bit more sensitive and a bit more empathetic. And I try to, and I've had to have, private conversations with family members that say, hey, I'm not the sickest girl in the room, but I'm not going to prove to you that they took the IV out of my arm for the monthly infusion, or, my ankle is swollen, or my fingers are swollen, and that's why I'm wearing compression gloves. We should really have a better handle on accepting people, how they feel and what they articulate.
Yeah, it's like you have nothing, one, you have nothing to prove, but two, it's like it's really none of their business too, right? It's like yeah, I'm just a big fan of being, that's the definition of being inclusive, right? Is
Right.
thinking about all different types of people with all different types of situations and disabilities, or just different issues that folks might be dealing with, and taking that into account when we have a space or an event or a whatever the thing is, just really making sure that we're kind of thinking through all different types of people. So I think that's a really important point. And I think when you are not a disabled person, or you don't spend time around disabled people, whatever the disability is, you can oftentimes forget that life doesn't just revolve around you and people that are like you. There are many different types of people in this world, and we need to be sensitive and accommodating to all types of people. So I appreciate that reminder too, I guess. So I guess my last question here is what does Lupus Awareness Month mean to you? We talked a little bit about it, but I guess what would you say to folks in particular that have like a friend or family member that has lupus, and they just don't really know how to show up for them or how to be that person for them?
Sure. So Lupus Awareness Month has really changed for me. Every year I order, and I'm wearing one today, purple wristbands, and what I use them for is icebreakers. So I get to say to somebody, May is Lupus Awareness Month. Would you wear this wristband for me? And that usually spurs some conversation where I'm not probably the first one that's going to raise their hand and explain. And I can tell you in a lot of instances at the dry cleaners, at the hair salon, people I see regularly, who at the nail salon, people who would have no idea that this is affecting my life. It's a wonderful icebreaker. It would be very hard for them to watch this video and hear this, but I have a family, sometimes not the most understanding group of people. So what I would often like to say to them is, you know, obviously one of the first ones is, if you have nothing nice to say, don't say anything. We don't judge a book by its cover. But more importantly, today, what I've learned as you go through life is everybody is a patient. Everybody gets sick in their lives. And, you know, supporting, being kind, having, you know, sometimes if it means not saying anything, it's better not to say anything than to say something totally and utterly just insensitive and ridiculous. I have a really good sense of humor, and that sometimes doesn't really help the cause, because I'm going to probably make fun of myself long before somebody gets the opportunity to do it. But I had a time period that my skin was just awful, Delaney. I mean, awful. I threw more money and makeup and brushes, makeup brushes, all sorts of things away. And it was such a difficult time. And I just remember people like staring at me. Offer a supportive comment. Don't, so, and in my work life, I would walk across this beautiful lobby to meet people I had, email and telephone relationships with, and they wouldn't say to me, "Hi, how are you?" They would say, "Are you okay?" And I would think to myself, "Oh boy, that didn't do a very good job with the makeup this morning." So, but put yourself, walk a mile in someone else's shoes. Be supportive, be kind. Take 2 more minutes to learn what might be someone's issue and what they're suffering from. Because I really have felt really let down by my family and my friends at times. I've had friends that have been, very insensitive over the things that they've been able to do physically. I had a friend once tell me she's very physically active, and if she didn't have friends who were going to, run and go to exercise classes with her, well, she probably wasn't going to spend much time with them. Well, I certainly wasn't someone who was going to be able to keep pace with her, so those kinds of pronouncements, they were hurtful over the years.
Yeah, that's hard. It's hard, I think people are just ignorant to what their comments might mean, or what the mind of someone with a chronic condition is like, the things that they think about. And I have this conversation with friends of mine around like body positivity as well. It's like everybody knows what, like, we look at ourselves in the mirror probably more often than we look at other people. And so it's like we know what's going on,
Right.
like we know what we look like that day. We know what issues we might be struggling with. We don't need to hear it from you, or be reminded of that when we're just trying to do our job or meet a friend for coffee, or whatever. So yeah, people just need to be more sensitive in general, and oftentimes it's a defense mechanism and all that. But yeah, I think that's really important, and just bringing awareness to the fact that people are living with this every day, and people this is their life, and it's not going to change until we find a cure or different treatment. So just be a nice person, people.
Right.
So anything you want to say in closing?
Well, I have to say, as somebody who's lived with lupus for 37 years and who has now lost her voice from coughing, I am really committed to that next generation, Delaney, making sure nobody lives with the shame that I lived with. And it was shame really thrust upon by other people. It wasn't, I really felt any differently. But I want them to have many, many opportunities. I had some years, and I had quite a few years, that I was symptom free. So I got the opportunity to travel. I got the opportunity to really enjoy life. And isn't that really what it's about? So making sure that we're present to see the research come through and provide new treatment options, because it isn't a one size fits all. Clinical trials and research have been so challenged by, you'll never meet two people with lupus who have the same symptoms at the same time. that has made it extraordinary for people to undergo, you know, anything that moves the needle forward on new therapies and treatments. I just really want to see this next generation thrive, um, because, all of the things that I stumbled with, I want to see everybody just run marathons and hurdle over those, small things. I also hope to be somebody who has a kind word and can say to somebody very quietly, whisper in, like, you're doing it, you're doing okay, because I'm somebody who every week looks at her calendar on Sunday and looks at her work calendar and her personal calendar and thinks, I simply don't know how I'm going to get through this. And I want somebody to live free of that sort of life, when financial commitments and things, that people feel a little more confident to live a normal life with lupus. So yeah, that next generation is really what I have my eyes on.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. I think, yeah, just that hope for the future and the next generation. I love ending on that note, because hopefully some of those folks are the people that are seeing these videos and interacting with our account for this month, because the message at the end of the day, really, over and over again, is just, you are not alone. So thank you so much for
Thank you.
helping to spread that message.
Thank you.
All right.